The next therapy I'm talking about, I've separated because I believe it's so important and it's so significant in my history and how I became the doctor that I am today. Most physicians who go into integrative medicine don't wake up one day and decide this is what they want to do. They have a personal health issue that leads them down this path, very often because they're dealing with the same thing that many patients deal with, which is the inability to get answers and frustration with the medical system. And so we're talking about colon hydrotherapy, the first integrative thing that I ever learned 30 years ago. So colon therapy, first and foremost, is a treatment for detoxification. It is a method for washing the colon to remove mucus, residue, bacteria, yeast, parasites, anything that is stuck to the wall of the intestines, which certainly can build up over years and years of eating a typical American diet. The result is that there is this coating surrounding the wall of the colon that is impairing a very important pathway for toxins to move out of the body and to get out in the stool. You add constipation to that, and you've really got a double problem because that is one of the most important avenues for eliminating toxins that are being processed throughout the body, coming through the liver, from the bile. It needs to get in the toilet and not get reabsorbed. So it's great for constipation. The reason that colon therapy can be helpful is because of the way that it washes and exercises the colon and restores muscle function. But mostly it's about working around and cleaning out this residue to improve this pathway for toxin removal. And so my history with this is that when I first moved to Raleigh in the late 80s, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I was an emergency physician. I did feel kind of like the glorified technician of the drug company, but hey, I had a job. And there was a period when I was repairing a house that I was living in then, and I didn't have a kitchen for quite a few months. And I was having to eat hospital food and drive through and microwave food, not eating well at all. So when I finally got my kitchen fixed, I was so excited. I so much wanted to eat healthy. And I shifted my diet 180 degrees. I started eating raw foods, organic foods, sprouts, and juices. Now, when you get into sprouts and juices, you're dealing with living foods, foods that are full of enzymes. And enzymes are the proteins that help digest and chew up all these toxins in our body, in our cells, in our bloodstream. And what I didn't realize is that when I made this big diet change and was putting all these scrubbing bubbles into my body to clean everything out, that I sure needed to have the doors and windows open to get everything out that was being loosened up. But at the time, I had no idea about this. So about 6 weeks into this diet, I began having all kinds of horrible skin breakouts, acne on my face, on my back, on chest. I began having horrible fatigue and cognitive problems, a lot of digestive issues. It sounded like a typical patient that comes to see me now. I've got all these problems and I don't know why all of this is happening all of a sudden. So because I had skin issues, I wound up going to the dermatologist. And of course, all they're going to give you is their creams and antibiotics. And none of that did me any good at all. Because I had GI issues, I went to see the gastroenterologist, and at 29 years old, I got my first colonoscopy. Now, the interesting thing was, after that workup, which by the way was completely negative, he couldn't find anything wrong, I did feel better. I had a couple of weeks of everything improving, and then it all went backwards. And I've had patients say that to me today. Is I felt so much better after my colonoscopy. What did they do to me in that colonoscopy? And the answer is they cleaned you out. And so it was kind of like a medicinal colonic. It just wasn't anything that was sustainable. And so I didn't really understand what was going on at that time. All I know is I'm back in trouble again. And so I went to another doctor and went to another doctor. And it was this succession of folks scratching their heads and handing out prescriptions of things, none of which were helping me. And so finally, I was in one of the health food stores and pretty desperate and talking to somebody there. And they said, you know, it sounds like you need to get your colon clean and you need to go see the colon therapist. And gave me the name of somebody here in Raleigh. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd never heard of this in my training, but I was ready to do whatever it took. So I showed up at the colon therapist office. And, you know, it was all very, very foreign to me. We had all the incense and crystals and the new age music. And, you know, that was just foreign to me, but I'm ready to go. So she explained a lot to me and said, you know, the purpose of this treatment is that each session we do, and it's about 12 to 15 sessions, is going to be loosening up this material that's stuck in your colon. And you'll go sit on the toilet after the procedure and release whatever's in there. And each time it's going to be moving around a little bit further. The procedure is actually very simple. You're on a table. The therapist is trained in how to operate the equipment. You're all covered up, so it's very private. You've got a little plastic speculum that goes into the rectum, and there's a tube that goes back for the water, and there's another tube that the stool goes back out through. And the therapist can control which direction things are moving, sending the water in. You feel, you notice that feeling of water coming in, and you'll reach a point where you feel like, I got to let this go. And about the time you feel that, it goes out. The therapist is able to control that opening and closing. They know the pressure in there. So you fill and then you release. And then you do another fill and it stretches out the colon. And then the natural peristalsis causes it to contract and you empty again. So that filling and emptying, that contraction of the colon, is really one of the key components to exercise those muscles. This is just like going and working out and building up that muscle strength. So that's why it is so good to help improve constipation. But again, that's not the sole purpose. It's mostly about removal of all of this material that's stuck in there. And so she explained that I probably wouldn't notice very much until maybe we got to about the fifth colonic, and that I might have a release then. And I said, a release? What's that? She said, wait and see. So here we get going, starting these treatments every week. Pretty uneventful at the beginning, you know, exactly as she described. Really didn't see anything particularly noticeable happening during that time. But we did get about to the fifth colonic, and just like she said, I got off the table, went and sat on the toilet, and I had this cramp hit from head to toe. It felt like my whole insides were coming out. And I released more stuff than I'd ever seen come out in the toilet. And it looked like about 2 cups of yellow Elmer's glue. And, you know, you get up and you turn around and look in the toilet and you see what's going on. And I was like yelling. And she came in the bathroom and said, yep, you've had your release. You're going to start to feel better. And she was explaining, you know, that was probably all this residue from everything I'd been consuming. And I figured it was all the Bojangles that I'd been eating during that 6 months that I didn't have a kitchen. And so I didn't notice too much after that. It really didn't make any difference at that time. Went back the next week, did another colonic, and here comes more Bojangles coming out. I couldn't believe there was that much more. And so that when I started could tell something. I could see my skin starting to clear up. My head felt a little clearer. My energy was a little bit better. And for the first time, I thought, I'm on to something. The next week, we do it again. Same result, felt even better. 2 or 3 more of those, and I was 90% back to normal. It was just stunning. And by the time I got through with the series, everything was fixed. I felt great, felt better than I had in my whole life. And I was mad as hell. I was just furious that I had been in this revolving door of all these doctors and nobody had any idea that this is what I needed to do. And foolishly, I went back to a couple of those doctors to report to them what I had done and said, you know, your treatment didn't help me. This is what wound up helping me. And, you know, all they did was laugh at me and kick me out. So that's when I started realizing, you know, there are 2 worlds out there. There's this conventional world that's pill pushers, And then there are the natural folks that are really looking back to many of the therapies that date back for decades that have been helpful for people. And the history on colon therapy is that it was actually developed here in the United States back in the 1890s. It was based on this concept called auto-intoxication, which means that the toxins in your intestines are going to be absorbed into your bloodstream, and you're just recycling it throughout your body. And that anything that can remove those toxins is going to help with health. And so this was a very popular and widespread therapy for many, many years. Until the drug companies came along and they started coming up with all their laxatives, and the hospitals said, well, you know, instead of us taking the time to give you a colonic, we're just going to give you a laxative. And so it really fell out of favor within the mainstream community back in the 50s, but continued as a popular treatment among other folks. And as I said, it really has become even more popular in the last 30 years because of folks trying to find alternative answers to these issues. And so what I've discovered for my patients is that people, particularly who have a lot of intestinal symptoms, and especially if we find yeast or bacterial overgrowth, you can treat them all day long with an antifungal or antibiotics or herbs, everything going in this way to kill all these bugs. But if you don't clean all this out, you really are not helping very much. It's just like having a junk pile next door. You know, it's not in my yard, but it's pretty stinky over there. And so we've got to help these people remove all of this dead material from their intestines. That's what the yellow Elmer's glue was, I later discovered, was a lot of dead yeast. And as I got further along in the treatment, it started lightening up and becoming whiter. That was getting into some of the live yeast, and then finally that was cleared out. And so I've had many patients over the years that we have discussed the benefits of colon therapy. They've had a lot of health issues that I knew would help them if they could get this. And they were a little turned off by it. It didn't really sit with them. You know, it's a little invasive in that area of the body. You don't want to have things done to. But I've had folks that were just, you know, not making progress. They were stuck. And I said, we got to do this. And this is going to make the difference. And when I finally just shook them by the shoulders enough and got them to do it and saw them back a couple of months later, every single person sits there with a smile on their face saying that this is one of the most remarkable treatments that they've ever done, thanking me for encouraging to do it. And, you know, they never look back. They realize that this was an important part, not just for their treatment, but for maintenance. And you can keep doing these about once a month to maintain healthy colon and elimination and prevent the buildup of these organisms and toxins. So if we talk about colon therapy, don't make a face at me. Really consider that this could be a very helpful treatment. I think it's one of the most important things that we provide, just as important as any of the IV therapies that I've mentioned. And it certainly has been life-changing for me, both as a person and professionally. And I know I would not be where I am today if I had not done this. But after that experience, I realized I can't just go back to the ER. I've got to do this colon therapy. I've got to provide this for our patients. And that's what led to me opening our office in 1994. And colon therapy has been a part of that ever since.